So recording started and action.
Welcome, Mike, and thank you for joining us today and giving us the time from your busy schedule. Can you please tell us about yourself and let the audience know more about you?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Really good to see you again. So my name's Mike Stephenson. I'm based in the northeast of England, so a place called Newcastle, which is 100 miles from Edinburgh and 300 miles north of London. My background, I guess, from a technology perspective, is I'm a long-term integration guy. I've first did my first integration project with BizTalk back in BizTalk 2000, I think it would have been. And then I've, over the years, just developed, working on BizTalk projects, got to know a lot of the BizTalk community people. So we all worked on a huge project in the UK where I got to know a lot of people. And that really got me into, in more getting into the community side of things, starting to blog and that kind of thing. So people like Saravana, Yossi Dawn, if anybody remembers back when Yossi was big in the BizTalk community, they were the kind of guys I got to work with back on that project. And then over the years, I sort of moved around a bit, and I moved to do a big integration project with a customer in London, and that really was where I first got into Azure back in when it was first in preview. And really from my side, that getting to tech lead one of the first big early adopters in the UK got me to be a little bit ahead of the game on what we were doing real world stuff when other people hadn't started even really learning about it or hearing anything more than user groups. So that kind of career wise, that really accelerated my career, being in the right place at the right time. And just kind of kept going with all the community stuff from there, and have pretty much done Azure integration ever since, up until the end of last year, where I've done a lot of work with Saravana and Kovai for a few years, just in an advisory capacity. So I was helping them with product direction and bringing that real world experience and helping customers that they have understand how to use the products that Kovai build. But then last year I decided to move from consultancy to having a product focus. So I'm now the product owner for Turbo 360. And it's quite exciting. It's bringing a lot of experience of new things to me. So I'm involved in product development. You get a bit more involved in sales and marketing, and you learn a lot more kind of business stuff. But I still get to keep my hat in the ring with consultancy on how do customers really solve these real problems that you have on both integration and just general Azure projects. I guess the bit where I'm focused at the minute is almost I know the architecture and the development stuff really well, but actually after you've done the development stuff, you've got to operate the solution. And for BizTalk migration customers, a lot of people haven't really thought about these problems yet of how are you going to run it, how are you going to manage costs. And I think it's a good place to be, actually, is telling people, you're going to have these problems in 6 months' time. Here's what you want to do about them, so they're prepared. And I think it's quite exciting.
Yes, it's really good how you have been managing to move with all this career still, yet even though you have been moving to a product focus, and still yet I am looking every other week for searching for the new Mike video where I can get some tips about integration and how to build integrations. It's amazing.
You mentioned that you were on this project with a very, very early adopter with Azure and everything, and trying to build the community. But how was it that back then, when there was no community around Azure, I guess, because you were kind of the first? How did you see the development of the community since then?
Well, actually, when you say you were the first, the great thing is in the MVP community, particularly, number one, you've got more visibility of the product teams and what they're doing, so that really helps those relationships. But also you learn about just having a bit of an outward view of what we're doing is one thing, but what are other people doing? Because while even if you're an early adopter, there are still other early adopters, and being able to you might not know somebody directly, but you know somebody who knows somebody that you can bounce ideas off. And then again, being one of those early adopters, product teams want feedback, so you'll develop your relationships there if you tell them what you're doing. And we made a big effort to kind of make sure we were communicating with people so that they I remember one time that the service bus team, when we were at the MVP summit quite early on, they wanted us to just talk to them about what we're doing and give them feedback on how we're using the tool. And I think when you come into product development nowadays, there's things like you know what you're trying to build, but you have to understand, one, the customer problem.
Yeah.
But also you have to understand that the way the customer is going to use your tool isn't necessarily the way you intended it to be used in the first place, and you'll discover a whole new field of opportunities that you need that customer engagement piece to really understand how to evolve a product better. And I think that what I learned then helps me now, kind of thing.
Talking about tools, we got an interesting question from the previous guest.
Yeah.
Actually, two questions. But the first one is actually really interests me a lot, which is have to do with your free time and what you do in your free time. Because we have been also finding in the feeds some posts that's not about integration lately, about golf. So what we got from Kent, which is our previous guest, he's also interested in golf, as you know. So the question that he is passing to you now is, what's your favorite shot in golf?
Okay. So let me. Favorite shot as in shot that I've hit or shot that I would like to hit.
We can
Or
take.
Yeah, you can take both, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming Kent knew I was the next guest then when he put these questions in, I'm guessing. So I guess let me give some background. You see, I want to know a bit about the person as well. Let me give you some background of my golf for those who don't know. So originally, when I was at school, I'd never touched a computer until probably when I went to university. I had no interest in computers at all. I was more bothered about football, golf, sport, and not from my physique. Not that you would know that nowadays, but I was actually really sporty at the time. And but my brother, on the other hand, was an absolute computer nerd who knew everything about computers from quite a young age. And when I was really into golf, so around 18 sort of thing. I was 16 to 18. I was quite a good golfer, really into it, and played in some kind of like regional level tournaments at a reasonable level. And sort of as I got a bit older, I kind of just you get to university, life changes, you're doing other things, and I drifted away from golf, and it's not something I came back to it a couple of times, but I came back to it properly about 2 years ago. And it was, for me, it was a post-COVID thing. You need to get a hobby. You need to be doing something. Why, you always used to enjoy this. Why aren't you doing it? But the bit I really discovered that I loved is golf simulators now as well add a whole new dimension to golf. So you get all this data about what are you doing in like an unbelievably crazy level of detail. Like I go for golf lessons to just to help improve my golf. And to be fair, I can still play a little bit, but I'm nowhere near the player I used to be. But I can still hold my own okay. But I go for a golf lesson, and every golf shot I hit, I get like a visualization on the screen of where the shot went, and there's this device that uses radar to scan you hitting the shot, and then I think every single shot you get maybe 50 statistics about everything from how fast and it's amazing. It really ticks.
So you are actually doing that on an actual golf field, and then they take this data. I thought that you're doing it.
No, it's a proper simulator kind of thing. So
okay.
And the idea in the golf world is when you were taught how to play golf, it was all somebody watches you and tells you what they think, and then you try to guess how to interpret that, and then you hit your next shot, and it's either good or it's bad, and you change it. But nowadays, with the statistics, there's a whole set of analysis that you can do. So when a good example was I used to hit a bad shot a certain way, and I always thought the reason I hit that shot was because I did X and Y in the wrong order, and that's why my bad shot went left. And when I was doing the lessons and working with a pro, and you use the data and you actually realize the reason you hit the shot left is the opposite reason to what you thought it was. And you learn how the data kind of tells you that. You can then work on your technique to like correct that. So, you know, at the end of the day, golf as a sport is all about compensation. So when you swing a golf club, you know, unless you're Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus, you don't swing the golf club perfectly. So your body's always compensating for being in the wrong position and doing the wrong thing, and you eventually hit the ball. But you learn from the data, you learn about what your compensations are and how to maximize and minimize them. And then you get better at golf, you know, and it's all sorts of things like when I played 20 years ago, every shot you were doing, you were guessing how far you had to go and how far you hit the ball. And nowadays, it's like I know exactly to the yard how far I hit every club on a fairly consistent basis, and how far you hit a 3/4 shot. So you know, in theory, although I'm not the player I used to be, I can still shoot a good score because I can more sort of tactically work your way around the golf course, where you always hit bad shots, but if your bad shots are better than they used to be, then you shoot an overall better score. So it's quite, you know, it just ticks a lot of boxes on my database. And the first, you know, I've got all the, you know, people who know me, you'll straight away know I've got 1 million golf gadgets already, and that's my hobby. When I've got a few spare pounds, I'll buy some golf gadget that I'll use for 5 minutes, and then I'll lose interest in it. But the first thing I do whenever I get one is straight on to the vendors. Right, have you got any APIs? What can I connect Power BI to this and do my own, you know? And I think the overlap between that data for golf, it gives me, you know, what I'd really love to do. Hey, I probably will never get the chance to do this, but one day at the Integrate event, my ambitions that I'll have some golf gadget that I can use in a demo and integrate it into Minecraft or something like that would be.
But that sounds like I mean, an interesting session for the coming years for
Yes.
Integrate, I guess.
I would love to see that actually, because it's super fun. And
But
it's amazing how the data and the data driven and like all of this analysis.
Well, I think
have been
it's
advanced.
interesting. You know, if you think about what we do, if we translate it back to work, right? So when we build integration solutions, we're always thinking about how do we integrate this EDI message into this system, and it triggers an order, and it's always like big abstract things that we're always quite disconnected from. You know what I mean? It's like you know, if I think of like my last project, you know, a customer orders a rail car full of stuff. The rail car gets shipped across the north of America, gets delivered. You know, I never really see any of that physical stuff. You just see all these API calls and all these messages with all this XML and JSON data. So you're miles through it. But actually, if I think of the golf world, you know, I've like some of the gadgets I've got. So I go for my golf lesson, and you hit the ball, and the radar device detects these 50 things, and it's on the screen. I can go on my phone into the app, and I can see all these data. But then I've also got this device, so it goes on your wrist here.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does is it monitors as you move your wrist like that. So that's like flexing your wrist, and that's extending it. And then I think the right terms are pronation and supination. So this device monitors these angles, right? And as you swing the golf club, what they've found is if they monitor all of the good players, they find ranges where good players tend to be. So let's say when you hit the golf ball, 80% of good players' wrist will be between there and there. And if your wrist's here, that's a reason why you're probably not hitting the ball very well. So suddenly with this, you know, they've got this device here which integrates into your phone app, integrates into the cloud. You've got the cloud analytics. They've got the big data analysis of all the tour players. But then their app connects to the TrackMan app for monitoring the shots you're hitting. It's all integration, but it's just
Yeah.
integration of the person at the end, like actually seeing devices connecting together, and that for me is the quite exciting bit, is seeing the things we've done for years, but actually, if you apply the things we know to the world you live in, it's it's a different type of integration, isn't it?
Yeah,
another dimension.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, everyone involved in this world and for this community knows that we find somewhere where we actually understand that okay, everything really is integration. Or yeah, I mean,
So I'll
yeah.
tell you, I think I didn't answer your question. So my favourite shot, right? So I last time I played golf was last Friday night. And there's a guy I used to work with, and his son's crazy into golf. And I said to him, when you're ready, give us a shout and I'll take you out on the golf course for his first game of golf. So we went out on Friday. We'd probably get maybe half a dozen holes before it got dark. And his young lad's about 12. He was really crazy about golf. And we're playing around, and they were asking about the course and stuff. And I was telling them about my best ever start to a golf round was so you start the course is 6 par fours in a row to start with, so you 4 shots on every hole, and we're walking up the fifth hole, and it just prompted this old memory from years ago of this great shot I hit, and bearing in mind it was getting dark by this point, so stupidly we were playing, and it was like literally pitch black, and so we got onto the next tee, and you couldn't even see the ground at your feet. It was that dark, so we weren't in. But I started this round, and on the first hole I got a par 4. The second hole was a par 4. I got a 5. The third hole I got a 4. Fourth hole I got a 3. So I was back to level par at that point, I think. And then the fifth hole is a par 4, and I hold my second shot with an 8 iron for an eagle on a par 4. And it's actually one of the hardest holes on the course. That's probably my favourite ever shot. So I went 5, 4. Was it 4, 5, 4, 3, 2? And then obviously I've got this run of a 5, 4, 3, 2, and the next hole is about 400 yards long. I'm like, well, I can't keep this run going. There's no way I'm going to have a 1 on a par 4. But that was my favourite one. My favourite shot I'd love to hit, probably. I'm not sure of the shot, but the course. So if I ever get the chance to play golf with Kent in Canada, I always remember there was a golf game I used to play as a kid called Arnold Palmer Golf, and you played this course in Banff near Calgary in Canada, and it always looked amazing. And you've got obviously the mountains and the forests in Banff area, and I think I'd quite like to play there maybe. Or the other one is I've also seen there's a golf course right next to the pyramids in Egypt. So obviously I might.
So it connects to you, Ahmed. So
it would be amazing. I would join that.
We will pass the answers to Kent. I hope he will listen to these answers. But
Yeah.
But Ian, I had another question also.
Yes, and also it's about data and how it is, and like it goes together with how, like, the latest Mike's content. I would say that you focus lately on how to do things right in the correct way, and you give advice on how to build integrations. His question to you was, what would your advice for the integration teams to better position the value of integration at the company?
I think so. That, I guess, the first thing's know your audience, because the value of integration is really difficult to articulate, and I think part of my answer would be a little bit biased in that's part of the reason I'm at Kovai at the minute doing some of the stuff, is I think it's difficult for customers to understand the value of integration, where the reality is no customer goes, I want to do an integration project. They always go, I want to do a project that delivers some business value, and it happens to need integration to achieve that. So you've got to remember, a customer doesn't really want to do integration, and actually a lot of the times the problem that they have is they have negative experience of integration. So they always hear that it's hard, they always hear it costs money, they always hears all these integration errors.
Mm.
And the problem that you have is if that's the messaging that they hear, the customer doesn't want to do integration because they view it as being a massive pain point. And I think what you really want to get to, your ideal organization is integration is a key differentiator between us and our competition, because if we do integration well, we know the chances are our competitors probably have pain doing it. So if we can do it cheap, if we can do it, well, when I say cheap, if we can do it cost effective is probably a better term. We can do good quality. I love Kent always talks about flexibility and time to market, which I think is huge. Those old days of BizTalk projects take 6 months before you see any business value back. That's logic apps, for example, span that on its head. And I did an integration project in like 2 days once, and I know things are changing a little bit as things get more complex again around security and network and stuff. But we have to balance that. We have to find time to market, being able to change things as requirements change. They're where the value of doing integration well comes into play, because you want your business to feel like integration empowers them to get stuff done, and it doesn't, like, it's not an anchor holding them back. Now the question is, how do you achieve that? It's the difficult bit.
Yeah.
For me, I think one of the first things I'd say is people don't appreciate the value of good comms and PR for the integration team. So you have to really communicate to your stakeholders the things that you're doing that add value and are good, because all they ever hear is other people complaining about what doesn't work. You never ever. So I remember we once had this incident, right? BizTalk example, going back years. And the customer would often be like, oh, the old beep BizTalk, because that's all they ever heard when people complain about it. And this one day we had this huge spike of messages. I can't remember the reason now, but what we were able to do is we had a BizTalk group with many servers in it. And if you remember, one of the great things about BizTalk that I think people never really appreciate is the host-to-host instance model. So normally, if you think of any of the other applications that this customer had, if they had like a 500% spike in load, you either have the application goes down, or you have an absolute nightmare, or you have to massively throw new servers at it. So what we did with BizTalk is, so we've got our BizTalk's throttling, right? Was that, Ahmed will remember that. So the problem was, right, BizTalk's being spiked with all this extra load, but it's protecting itself. And while throttling, many people think it's a negative scenario. Throttling's basically BizTalk protecting itself from breaking other things, other integrations. So what we were able to do is we see the issue, but then what we said was, right, well, if we just add a couple of extra host instances onto a few of our other nodes, we can maximize getting through the backlog of messages, and then increase the throughput, and then move it back when we're done. So what we were able to do is deal with that massive unexpected spike of messages just by reallocating some of our host instances and then putting it back when we're finished. And I kind of had to sit down with them and say, look, you don't really realize what we did here. We didn't throw, I think about the other applications that throw like 10 new servers at it without thinking because they were having load problems. It's like, no, we had no downtime. We had no extra hardware requirements. We just made a small tweak, dealt with the backlog, and instead of it taking days to process, we processed it in like 2 or 3 hours by just reallocating stuff. And then we corrected it, and it's like, that's actually a really good story. But you've got to remember that the non-technical people have no clue what you're talking about. So that ability to communicate in an effective way is really good. I guess if we translate that to Azure, the equivalent of that scenario would be something like, we've got that burstable plan on logic apps where it can just burst out, process additional nodes, and then burst back in when it's done. If you think about that, technically that's actually a really hard problem for us to solve. on Azure, Microsoft have made it just a button that we click, and then suddenly it deals with that load. And I think that there you can communicate what the bit of magic that you guys did solve that business problem, and the customer suddenly goes, "Oh, actually, this integration platform is pretty cool. Really, it just magically did that." But if you just do it and nobody knows, then all they hear is the negative stuff.
Exactly.
I think
Yes, it's amazing. I actually, you got my brain running 100 miles per hour, because I never saw the way that we did was like, oh, we just create extra host instances, and we just like move them back, and we give extra we give extra space for the specific host. I didn't see those kind. It was just like a normal
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah.
I think
So
yeah. It's one of those things as well, Ahmed, in cloud. I think people, when we think about the position of apps to app services and that kind of thing, people don't really appreciate the power that BizTalk host instance model had, because you can have your server group, but you
yeah,
can actually control what executes where, and you can move it dynamically to manage your load, and that you can't really do that on maybe you probably could with AKS a little bit, but certainly for a lot of the other PaaS services and SaaS services, you don't really have that, and it give us a lot of options, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to you. If nobody knows what you did, then all they ever hear is the negative stuff, and suddenly your integration platform becomes the thing people don't like. But if they know the good stuff, then suddenly they go, yeah, we want to use it more because we get stuff done, and it's an easy way to. I think I say this. I do a lot of the cost stuff now. That's one of the first things I say to people when you're doing cost management is make sure you tell people about the cost savings you identify, because people always hear the bills just getting bigger.
Yeah.
And if you tell people we did this and it saved you X thousand a month, then suddenly people go, "Can you tell me how you did that? Because we could maybe do the same
yeah,
thing over
exactly.
here."
Now it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I think that
Yeah,
it's really interesting also to just discuss that what you said there is that you actually bring to light what happens that people doesn't really know, because we as integrators are is in the background, and what happens is in the background, and if everything
yeah.
just runs smoothly, then no one knows about us, and I think that we kind of like that, but maybe we should like be more proud of actually when it's up and running, and when we actually do stuff that even helps the business without them even knowing.
Yeah, it's little things like we delivered this integration that I mean a good question, right? The integrations that you're currently working with, how much are they worth to the business? You know what I mean? It's like I remember, there's an integration project I did a few years ago, and it's and it was actually running on, it was BizTalk standard on Azure, right? And on Azure IaaS, and it was a really small BizTalk bit. And I think it was costing maybe like 1,000, 1,500 a month. It wasn't expensive, but it was just a small BizTalk piece. And people are going, well, you know, is that too expensive at the time? I mean, again, it was a good few years ago, this one, but it actually was processing $1 billion worth of like a month of people's business. And you think, actually, that's quite good return on investment, really. If you're paying $1,500 a month to process $1 billion worth of stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually you probably want something bigger, more powerful, and more resilient than the setup you've got. Really, if you think about, if you have a problem, how do you how long does it take you to deal with that? What's the cost of a delayed thing and that kind of thing? But you need to think about your projects in those ways about what is and Kent definitely. I've talked to him in the past about the kinds of ideas he learned from the Power Platform team that are applicable to integration teams. What is the value of what you do, and it's not just what does it cost and how long does it take, and is it going to be done in a month or not?
yeah,
It's yeah, it's value, and it's I think that I mean it's we can discuss this for 2 or 3 different sessions, but I really want to move back a bit. We want to move back to integrate this year, and I mean you had three sessions at integrate, and before we even try to deep dive a bit in your session, is that Three sessions. Is that a conference record?
Possibly, yeah. Well, but the bit you don't realise as well, though, is that the reason I was running around quite a lot is we also recorded about 20-25 podcasts at
Yeah.
Integrate behind closed doors. So
Yeah.
every time a speaker finished, we would grab them and we'd take them down the back corridor into another room and do a podcast recording. So it was actually quite a lot. I think I was on the host of about 10 podcasts, and Lex did another 10, something like that. And what was quite interesting actually is when you're trying to have a chat with somebody about their session, but you hadn't seen their session because you were doing another podcast. That was quite challenging, but at the same time, it was also good because I know enough about the topic to ask some really good questions. But really, you just want people to tell you what they've done, you know.
Yeah.
But it was fun. But I guess the Integrate Summit. So I think at the end of the day, you've got to remember that the Integrate Summit's partially community and partially Kovai organise it and run it, and we have the option to sort of tell people a bit about what we're doing. So we had 3 sessions, and what I try to do is I want to, and hopefully people appreciate this, but I want to tell you about a product, but really I want to tell you in a way that means you're going to have some good value to go back with. And I think we see that because we have a lot of people come and say, can you tell me more about this? So what I always try and do is like, here's a real world scenario.
Yeah.
I don't think there's really a great way to sort this problem out. Here's what we're doing. It may help. So that's really why if you take the cost session,
Yeah.
I was trying to tell you about here's how we saved a company a load of money. And actually, I'm a big believer that in the cost space, integration people can really be effective there because we've talked about this a lot. The idea of I go in as an integration team, I have a good connection with all the different teams and what they're doing, and if I can show best practice of how you manage cost and integration, other people want to know what you're doing because they've got cost problems, they don't know how to fix it. But I think the integration person understanding dependencies makes you have all the right soft skills and quite a lot of the technical skills to solve that problem as well.
I think it's completely normal also because we are all using tools. Even if you're using Azure, it's just a stack of tools.
Exactly.
If you're using like Kovai product or any other products in the market, you're just trying to communicate how can I deliver value using those tools, because I'm not trying to create a new tool. I am trying to make sure that the customer gets the best out of it. So I think it's the best way to actually deliver this message.
And a lot of these skills are very transferable. It's like we spotted a few good ones last year. It's amazing when you look at the cost side of things. Like integration teams, in my experience, the integration team costs are just a tiny fraction of a customer's overall Azure cost.
Yeah.
But I think some of the things you see are really applicable. Like being on top of your SQL database is a big cost area potentially. And then I've looked at like other teams, and the biggest problem I see is people deploy stuff and they never then go 3 months later, did we deploy the right size thing? Because we're already doing the next project, and the team who deployed that app originally might not even exist anymore. And you just see scenarios where the app's being used like 10% of what they scaled it for. And this is my thing, when you're doing, like, you guys as a consultancy working with Azure, if your customer spends 100 grand a month on Azure, but say 20-25% of that's inefficient, that's 25 grand a month they could be spending building new integrations, because that money can be reallocated to other stuff.
And there is a big challenge also on, like, you need to tell if something that already costs this $100 a month, or as you said, this customer, they didn't really request a change, you didn't request a new integration, you can see that this costs a lot, you need to rebuild this to make it cost, and then you end up with a conversation, why do you want me to rebuild this? Why should I pay you to do something that's actually working? And you need to actually bring up the cost card because this is actually, why do you want to do that? It's just to reduce the cost.
Yeah, and I guess that, I mean, we all three here agree. But Mike, you've been in the, I mean, the integration business for so long, and now you're working with the cost. And I mean, all of your, the first session you had was regarding cost. But how would you say, like, the typical integration technician, engineer, or architect, what, I mean, what would your advice be for them to actually get involved in the cost discussions, get involved with using a proper tool like Kovai's tool to actually get on top of costs? What would you say to them?
I think you've just got to do it regularly, but the most common thing I see is people review costs when senior management complain about the size of the bill. Um, if you can look at costs, and they also look at it at such a high level, we look at our overall Azure cost, and if you say we spend 100,000 a month on Azure, but that doesn't really mean anything because you've probably got so many teams and so many applications that it's just a number, and you need to sort of break it up and start getting teams to look at this idea of how much are we spending. And actually, Ahmed and I have talked a lot about this idea of cost as part of a sprint retrospective. So how many times do your team get the end of the sprint and go, right, here's our current running costs for dev and test, maybe even prod as well if you've already got stuff in prod, and can we take any items into the next sprint to optimize our costs? And I think for me, what I'm really enjoying at the minute is like I guess my background, where people found my community content interesting, because I always try to focus on those higher level sort of where do I use what questions, because I think I feel like there's always been loads of people who talk about how do I do this specific thing with a logic app, or I had this problem and here's how I solved it. And there's some really great people that talking about that kind of content, but I always preferred the where do I use a logic app and where do I use a function, because I can solve the same problem with both of them, but it would work in different ways and it would have different outcomes and other factors come into play.
Example, also when it goes wrong, it will go wrong in different levels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think for me, I wonder if sometimes, because I didn't come from, I touched on this at the start, how I wasn't really interested in IT as a kid.
Yeah.
And I originally I went into business studies, and I always found this decision making idea quite interesting. So how do I decide whether to do A or B? And actually, quite interestingly, I'll tell you a little old story. This is one of the things that got me interested in IT. Was when I was on a business studies degree, we had to do this Monte Carlo simulation thing, and this was back in the kind of the mid '90s probably, and the course, there's like probably about maybe about 130 people on the course, and you had to compare these two projects and work out the answer. And you were given this spreadsheet. What they were really looking for was, can you take this spreadsheet and make it do a Monte Carlo simulation and come up with a good answer? And basically, I kind of got a bit geeky at that point, and I kind of started learning how to use Excel to drive the simulations in VB script, I think it would have been, and behind the scenes. And actually, I was the only one who got the spreadsheet to actually come up with an answer out of the whole course. And I was like, I can do this actually. And it was like, there was a couple of other things that kind of happened around the same time that sort of made me think, oh, maybe I've got the right way of thinking to deal with this kind of problem. But but coming back to the decision making, that's one of the factors you would factor into a project decision, and would be that simulation and forecasting. But if we move that to technology, it's the same thing. So when I'm trying to decide a technology, I think sometimes a developer might focus on what have I done before and what do I like. What skill do I want to learn next, and what do I like working with? But they're just one stakeholder in the decision, because and I always think, right, who are all the different people involved? So I might spend a week writing this code, but this person over here is going to have to run this for the next 5 years. And this person here is going to change it in 2 years' time, and this person's going to test it. And And I think you've got to think about these different stakeholders and how they're impacting the decision that you make. And but then you've also, when we just think of the pure architecture piece, well, it's also what are the different features of the service. So if we go back to functions, logic apps, it's things like, well, I've got the run history in logic apps. I've got the higher throughput from a function, and you're always trading off these things, and then I guess one of the things is the answer always depends. It's never black and white.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you can rule out a couple of options, because you can say, a great one would be, right, we don't have any .NET developers, so let's use a logic app. That can rule the function out, and then you just go to, well, do we do consumption or standard logic apps or something like that? But working through that decision tree, something I find interesting, and I think what I've found is when I talk about the comparison of technology, I get a lot of people find those videos really interesting. And what I'm hoping, if we start touching on the Nordic Summit, what I'm hoping is, if I take that to the next level, and I'm going to focus on cost because that's the area I'm working in predominantly at the minute. But actually, I've got to make these decisions in my project. If I just focus on the dimension of cost, what do they really mean? What are the things that I should be doing in a logic app standard to, what things affect the cost, but then what are the decisions that I can make that would determine how I would configure my logic app and stuff like that, and I think I was actually speaking to a company this week who, the first thing they said was, we had a partner build a solution for us.
Yeah.
And then we had a load of problems, and then we worked through them and got it fixed. And it was really because the partner, they can write a logic app. I can find 100 people in an hour who can write a logic app.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find somebody who can write a logic app where they can make the right decisions that it's going to get you a successful outcome, where it's going to be, it's things like it's going to be well tested. So in 6 months' time, when you want to change it, you're gonna be able to go and run those tests and see if it still works. And then when you make the change, see if it's broken. It's going to be hard to find somebody who knows that it's going to be a cost-efficient logic app. It's hard to find people who would know how the different technologies might have been combined. So let's say I use logic app plus function plus API management. Which one did I use in which place and why, and how do they work together to solve this business problem? Which doesn't, the reality is the business has no interest in whether you used a logic app function or an API.
Exactly.
They just
don't have interest either.
They don't care. They just want their order to come into their order system and how it gets there. Yeah, exactly. And that's where. There's so many different factors in there. I find that personally really interesting, and I think there's a gap of people who talk about that stuff, which hopefully are kind of fill that gap a little bit.
I think this gap is moving now.
Yeah, I think the gap is moving, and I think that, every time you touch upon a subject, Mike, you are really deep diving into the reason and trying to find, and now we talk about integration, and everyone listening to this can feel and hear that you're really interested in solving the actual problem and the business value to it, and it's more than the technology. And as you said, the business doesn't really care about the technology, but we do. But if we can combine the business understanding with the technology, we will be building technology we like building, but also solving business problems, which means that we will build even more technology. So it will.
I think one of the things I enjoy about when I talk about where do you use what is what I'm also hoping to do with the community content. And Ahmed is one of the best people at this, where I'll say something in a video, or we'll be having a chat and I'll say something. And you had this earlier in the call where it's like, you've given me an idea of something I need to go and think about. And then you'll because what I try to do is I think BizTalk really taught me this, that no matter how much of an expert you think you are or anybody else thinks you are, in BizTalk you always knew you didn't know everything. And and there was bits of BizTalk I'd never used in the real world. I'd played around probably with, but never used in the real world. And And I think the same is true of Azure. There's so many different bits of Azure and so many ways you can solve a problem. Nobody knows everything. But I think what I'd hope to get across is I'll put a video out, for example, that says, here's my thoughts on where you could use what. And if somebody comes along, I've had this a few times where, oh, I've got this different opinion, or I've got this other idea about some bits that you could do. That's what I think community should be about, is if I can make somebody else contribute to the bit that I did by asking a great question, that somebody else then gets helped out by the question or the answer to the question, and they go and do a blog post or a video that takes the idea further. That's really what I think good community should be, is we all help level each other up. So that's what I'd love to hear from people, is, you know, what things, if you see my video and you've got a great question, I love it, you know.
Yeah. So write something about it, or write to you about it, and I mean, just to keep the community.
Well, actually, keep being curious and just take.
Yeah, definitely. This part is called integration love story. So what we mean about that is that everyone has an integration love story. Everyone has this business case, this technology, this customer, or something that we did where we actually like fell in love with integration. You talked about some of them, but do you have one story?
I've got a great one. I'll tell you about a time I made myself redundant, which actually I think, especially when if you happen to work as a freelancer, as I often did, making yourself redundant kind of a good thing to do in some ways. But so I mentioned this big UK IT project where I first met Saravana and Yossi and some of the other guys. One of the things I had to do on that project was HL7 messaging. So we had a big BizTalk thing. We had to parse and transform HL7 messages, and my mini sub team, so there was me and there was one other guy from a third party vendor who helped us do the mapping, was so what would happen is they had a document that would describe all the HL7 messages that we're getting, and then they'd have it. So in addition to the Word document, they have an export from this third-party tool with an XML definition of what all the messages look like, and it was HL7 v2. And what happened was every few days or every week, we'd get an update of this document and this XML extract, and we'd have to go and make changes to all of the maps and the parsers and everything. And it was the worst job. It's like, it was so tedious. I mean, in some ways it was a job for life, because they would change it and you'd have to work out what had changed. And I was just like, oh, I don't know how much more. Like, I think I'm one of these people where anything that or things that I find dull to do, it's like, how can I automate this? Because my brain doesn't deal with those kind of things well. And one day, so we're on this project, and you come up with these stupid ideas in the stupidest of places. I think it was like having a shower or something, and it was like just an oh my god moment. And like full Back to the Future, fall off the toilet, come up with a flux capacitor kind of thing. And we basically, I went in the next day and I'm chatting to the guy I worked with, and I was like, I've got this really crazy idea. Tell me this is stupid, or tell me this is genius. And we basically thought, actually, that's really cool. So what we did, instead of building the maps to transform the document, to transform the HL7 messages, we basically built a new map that would take the input of the Word document and the XML extract. So you can see Ahmed thinking map. When I say map, I didn't actually mean a BizTalk map in this case. We had this third party thing. But think of it, so our input is the Word document and the giant XML file of definitions. And we built a transform tool for integration where the output was maps that would transform the messages, parsers that would parse the messages, sample messages for every single possible combination, and unit tests for every single possible test scenario. What we did was we get an updated spec, We spend days transforming the messages, put them in, building the things, put them in the test environment. Then they give us a new one, and we go and change them again. So you can never really test anything. So what we ended up with was they give us a new version of the document in the XML file. We click a button. 2 minutes later, we've got 2,000 sample messages, 2,000 unit tests, a whole new set of maps. We run NUnit, and they all pass, and then we just deploy this to the environment, and that's the job done. And we've taken both of our jobs from being full time, bored as hell, doing nothing but this stuff, to being a click of a button and a deployment task, and then we got involved in other projects, and that was the bit on.
This is amazing, and I'm really curious actually to see
But
this.
where was the? I mean, it's a brilliant story, and I mean, but where is the actual love moment? Is it when you got the idea, or when it actually worked?
It was for me, it was the idea, because it was just thinking about the problem differently. You know, we sometimes in integration we get so focused on how do we solve the thing in front of us.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about the problem differently, to suddenly realize actually we could do this instead of the building the transform, we build I think Lord of the Rings, I'm sure, was out at the time, and it was the one we joked about it, the one map to rule them all kind of idea. And it was, for me, that was the bit where it kind of really, I guess, cemented that idea of just thinking a bit more outside the box than I had been doing in the past. Like, for me, it was like a level up moment in my career where I realized that actually I could do a bit more than what I was doing. And we got involved in other projects from there, and and otherwise it would have been months stuck on the most boring project. And we actually built the coolest solution probably I've ever built. And honestly, it didn't take that long to build it. It was only like a few days to build it.
Yeah.
And then we did all the other cool stuff instead, which
And imagine the cost savings that you actually, or the business value that you actually brought in this. I mean,
wow, I didn't know that kind of stuff then, though.
Yeah,
So really,
Yeah, but
we,
until today, HL7 is like it's a nightmare. Until
yeah,
it doesn't matter. The older it gets, more what do you call it, harder when it's aged. It's just we didn't get
back
as integrators with it, I
back
think.
then, nobody really knew what we did. That was so cool.
Yeah,
Because we were so far detached from the people who really would have understood the business value of what we did, and we didn't really know how to communicate that up and stuff like that. But it was a really cool project at the time, and but that's the loops back to the tell people about your successes. And
Yeah, it's a lovely story, and I mean, yeah, as it has every topic that we discussed in one story. But as you said, maybe you wasn't aware of it at that moment. But that's great
but
story. Yeah.
yeah, we also have one tips that you need to ask the next guest.
Yes.
Question: We
Next
don't
question.
have a name for the next guest now.
oh,
So
okay.
what you need to do is to just be as general as possible and give us
Yeah.
surprising guest
So
topic.
can I have a few bits of criteria of who the next guest likely to be? I'm assuming an integration person. I'm assuming they're doing a bit of Azure.
And you can also assume that it will be someone from the Nordic Integration Summit coming up.
Right. So probably a speaker kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the easy one would be, can I ask 3 questions, if that's all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So my first one would be, which is your favorite thing on Azure to use and why?
Mm.
My second one would be, what is your most memorable cock up that you're allowed to share with us, that you've done as an integration, and tell us about it, and
Yeah.
and then what is your most memorable success story, that you're allowed to share with us as well, and why did you enjoy it, what stood out, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's
Three great questions, and we'll pass them on to the next guest. And we're looking forward to the answers.
yes. And we're looking forward for your next recording here, because this is not gonna be our last one. We're gonna record
Definitely not.
another one. talking, because I had some questions that we didn't get to ask because we are running out of time, and we would like to have more reasons to get you here again.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Okay. But
Yes.
yeah, thanks so much, Mike. And I mean, always a pleasure to talk to you. And I mean, always very good stories. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye.